I thought I was caught between loyalty and desire, but I never imagined the two women pulling me apart would be my boss and my best friend's mom. I never expected my life to feel this complicated at 24. Most people my age worry about careers, rent, or late-night plans with friends. But somehow I found myself standing at a strange intersection, drawn toward two women I should never have felt this way about. The first was my boss. She wasn't just someone I worked for. She was a presence. The kind of woman who walked into a room and carried it without trying. Her voice was steady, her movements graceful, her words always sharp but never cruel. People respected her, and I admired her more than I was willing to admit. There were moments at the office when the air between us seemed to shift, little things no one else would notice. The way she would hand me a file and her fingertips brushed against mine a little longer than necessary. The way her perfume lingered in the air after she passed by, making it hard to focus on anything else. She always kept her professional mask on, but behind her eyes, I sometimes caught glimpses of something softer, something lonelier. And then there was my friend's mom. She was the opposite of my boss in every way, yet somehow just as magnetic. She had a warmth to her, the kind that wrapped around you like a blanket on a cold night. Her laugh was easy, her smile natural, and her presence felt like home. I had spent so many evenings at their house over the years that she became more than just my friend's mom. She was someone who always remembered the little things about me. How I took my tea, what days I looked most tired, when I needed encouragement without asking. But lately, even her gestures felt different. One evening, as she poured tea for me, her hand lingered just a second on mine when she passed the cup. Another time, her gaze held mine a little too long after a casual joke, her lips curling into a smile that felt almost private, as if it was meant just for me. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just being kind. But I couldn't ignore the strange feeling in my chest when she leaned close to whisper something, or when she laughed and touched my arm gently in passing. Two women. One who represented authority, power, and the kind of confidence I'd always admired from afar. The other, warmth, familiarity, and an intimacy I couldn't quite explain. I never wanted to cross any lines. I respected them both too much. And yet, the more I tried to ignore what I felt, the clearer it became. Something unspoken was alive between us. At the time, I didn't realize just how deep it would go. I thought I was simply noticing small things, fleeting moments that meant nothing. But looking back now, I can see it clearly. That was the beginning. The beginning of being pulled into something I never expected. The beginning of being caught between two women who would change everything. It's strange how ordinary moments can suddenly feel different. How something as simple as staying late at the office, or helping someone move a box, can stir emotions you don't want to admit. That's exactly what began happening to me. At work, my boss started letting her guard down in ways she never used to. It began small. Asking if I wanted to join her for a late coffee after finishing a big project, or telling me a story about her early career when everyone else had already gone home. She would sit across from me, her jacket draped loosely over her chair, her hair pulled back but a few strands falling free. The glow of the desk lamp softened her features, and for the first time, I saw more than just the strong, commanding woman everyone else knew. There was something tender in the way she spoke, as if she wanted me to see her not as my superior, but simply as a woman. And in those moments I couldn't help but notice the details. How her hand lingered on the rim of her coffee mug. How her eyes searched mine as though she wanted me to respond with more than polite interest. Then there were the evenings at my friend's house. His mom always found reasons to pull me into little tasks. Lifting a box from the attic, reaching something from a high shelf, fixing a stubborn window. At first, I thought she was simply being hospitable, giving me chores so I wouldn't feel like a guest. But the more I helped, the closer she seemed to stand. I remember one evening when I carried a heavy box down the stairs. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, "You make me feel like I don't need anyone else around the house." It was meant as a compliment, maybe even just a joke. But the way her hand rested lightly on my forearm as she spoke, it didn't feel casual. It felt like a message she didn't quite want to say out loud. And I felt it. Every time. The problem was I didn't know what to do with those feelings. With my boss, I worried about overstepping. She trusted me with more responsibility than anyone else at work. Was I confusing gratitude with attraction? With my friend's mom, I feared something even worse, betrayal. She had always been kind like family. What would it mean if I allowed myself to see her differently? I told myself to ignore it, to draw lines in my head that I would never cross. But those lines blurred more with every passing day. My boss, leaning a little too close over my shoulder as she explained a project, her perfume stirring something deep in me. My friend's mom brushing her hand against mine when she handed me a plate, her smile softer, warmer, as if it carried a secret. They probably didn't even realize how much their presence affected me. Or maybe they did. And me? I was stuck somewhere in the middle, trying to tell myself it was harmless, even as my heart beat faster in both their company. Looking back, I know this was the stage when the boundary between simple kindness and something more began to quietly disappear. And no matter how hard I tried, there was no pretending anymore. There's a moment in every story when the air changes, when what once felt like imagination suddenly becomes reality. For me, that moment came twice. Once in the quiet glow of my boss's office, and once in the familiar comfort of my friend's living room. It happened with my boss first. We had stayed late again, going over a presentation for a client. The building was nearly empty, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. She stood behind me, leaning close as I scrolled through the slides. I could feel the warmth of her presence before I even saw her reflection on the computer screen. "Not like that," she murmured, reaching forward to guide my hand on the mouse. Her fingers slid lightly over mine, adjusting the movement. It should have been a quick correction, professional, nothing more. But she didn't pull her hand away right away. And I didn't move mine. For a few seconds we stayed there, our hands overlapping, her shoulder brushing mine, her breath so close I could feel it against my skin. I glanced sideways, and for the briefest instant, her eyes met mine. There was something unguarded there. Something that made my chest tighten. Then she cleared her throat, stepping back, slipping her hands into her pockets as if to erase the moment. I told myself I was reading too much into it, but deep down I knew better. And then, only a few days later, it happened again. But this time with my friend's mom. We had finished dinner at their house. My friend had gone upstairs to take a call, leaving the two of us at the table. She refilled my glass of water, then sat back down across from me. For a while we just talked about her garden, about the neighborhood, about things that seemed ordinary. But there was something in her tone that felt different, more personal. At one point, she laughed softly at something I said, then rested her chin in her hand, her eyes fixed on me in a way that felt far too intimate. "You've grown up so much," she said quietly, almost as if she was talking to herself. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding in my chest, and when she reached across the table to brush an invisible crumb from my sleeve, the world seemed to slow. Her touch was light, almost nothing at all, but the warmth of it lingered long after her hand dropped back into her lap. It was such a small gesture, but it left me reeling. Two different places, two different women, and in both moments, something subtle had shifted. What used to be safe, simple, almost explainable, now felt dangerous, thrilling, and impossible to ignore. That night, lying in bed, I kept asking myself, was I imagining this? Were they both just being kind and I was the one twisting it into something more? Or was there really something there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to seeing them the same way. Because once you feel that shift, the warmth of a touch that lingers too long, the look in someone's eyes that holds too much meaning, you can never unfeel it. The hardest part wasn't what happened between us. It was what happened inside me. After those moments, the brush of a hand in the office, the lingering touch at the dinner table, I couldn't shake the thought that something was shifting with both women. But the more I noticed, the more conflicted I became. Because it wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something heavier. At work, my boss began sharing little pieces of herself that I knew she didn't show to anyone else. One late evening after a tense meeting, she admitted softly, "Sometimes it feels like I'm carrying everything alone." She said it quickly, almost regretfully, as if she hadn't meant for me to hear it out loud. I remember the way she stared out the office window as she spoke, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked human, tired, vulnerable, maybe even a little fragile. I wanted to reach out, to reassure her that she wasn't as alone as she thought. But my hand stayed on the desk, gripping the edge too tightly, because I knew what that gesture would mean. And then there was my friend's mom. One evening, after I helped her with some groceries, she sat down beside me on the couch. The house was quiet, her son upstairs, and she let out a sigh heavier than anything I'd heard from her before. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes it feels like the days all blur together. Like no one really sees me anymore." Her words stayed in the air between us, filling the silence with a truth too raw to ignore. I looked at her then, not just as my friend's mom, not just as the warm woman who had always taken care of everyone else, but as someone who longed to be seen, to be valued. And for a moment I thought she saw that recognition in my eyes, because she smiled faintly, almost sadly, and touched my hand in a way that felt like both a thank you and a confession. Two women, both so different, both letting me glimpse parts of themselves they kept hidden from the world. And me? I was caught between admiration, desire, and guilt. Every time my boss let her voice soften in private, I felt a pull I couldn't deny. Every time my friend's mom let her eyes linger on me too long, my heart raced with something I didn't want to name. But the guilt was always there. What would people say if they knew? What would it mean for my job, for my friendship, for my own conscience? I was too young to carry something this complicated, and yet I couldn't walk away from it. Late at night, I would lie awake asking myself if I was just imagining it all. Maybe I was seeing signs where there were none. But then I'd remember the way her hand had rested on mine, or the way her eyes searched my face as though waiting for an answer. And deep down I knew the truth. It wasn't just in my head. The lines had already blurred. And the longer I stayed silent, the harder it became to know what was right anymore. There comes a time when silence can't hold everything in anymore. That's what I learned in those weeks. When the subtle looks, the small touches, the quiet confessions began to grow too heavy to ignore. Started with my boss. We had wrapped up a big project successfully, and she suggested we celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just a drink in her office before heading home. She poured the wine herself, her jacket already off, her sleeves rolled up, looking less like the woman who commanded conference rooms and more like someone finally exhaling. We sat across from each other, glasses in hand. At first, the conversation stayed light, but slowly it shifted. She spoke about sacrifices, about how much she had given up to reach where she was. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice soft and tired, "success feels emptier when you don't have anyone waiting for you at the end of the day." I didn't know what to say. The honesty in her tone cut deeper than any polished speech I'd heard her give. She was letting me see her, really see her. And in that moment she wasn't my boss. She was just a woman sitting across from me, her hand curled loosely around a glass, her eyes searching mine as if she wanted comfort but didn't know how to ask for it. I wanted to reach across the desk to take her hand. But I didn't. Instead, the weight of that unspoken moment hung between us, a pull I felt in my chest long after I left her office. And then, almost as if fate was testing me, I found myself in another moment just days later, this time with my friend's mom. It was late, the house quiet. She had asked me to carry a few things upstairs, and when I came back down she was sitting on the couch, staring at the muted television. Something in her expression stopped me from leaving. "Sit for a while," she said, patting the seat beside her. I did. first we made small talk, but it didn't last long. Her voice softened as she admitted, "It's strange. I spend so much time taking care of others, but sometimes I feel invisible in my own home." I turned toward her, unsure of what to say, but before I could answer, she placed her hand gently over mine. Her touch was warm, steady, not accidental this time. "But you notice," she whispered, almost as if she was confessing something to herself. "You see me." My chest tightened. The truth in her words struck me harder than I expected. I did see her. Maybe more than I should have. And sitting there with her hand on mine, her eyes locked on me in the quiet of that living room, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. The affection, the desire, the guilt. Two women. Both reaching out in different ways. Both letting me glimpse the emptiness behind their strength. And me caught in the middle, torn between comfort and passion. Between what I wanted and what I feared. That was the turning point. The moment I realized I couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. The lines had already been crossed, even if no one had spoken the words out loud. And I knew sooner or later I would have to choose. By then. I knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Moments had turned into patterns, and patterns had turned into feelings too heavy to ignore. The question wasn't if it would come to the surface, it was when. That when arrived sooner than I expected. One evening my boss asked me to stay after everyone else had gone. Her tone was calm, but her eyes carried something restless. We sat together in her office, the city lights glowing faintly through the tall windows. She started with work, but quickly drifted away from it, her words slowing, softening. Finally, she stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Vulnerable. Searching. "You know," she said quietly, "there's a danger in letting people too close. But sometimes, I wonder if that danger is worth it." Her words sent a shiver through me. She wasn't talking about work anymore. And I knew. This was the moment she was opening a door, inviting me to step through. My heart raced, my hand resting on the arm of the chair, aching to reach across the desk. But in that heartbeat of hesitation, I saw her pull back slightly, as if bracing herself for rejection. I didn't answer right away, because part of me was somewhere else. Only a few nights earlier, my friend's mom had done something similar. We had been sitting on her back porch, the air warm and still, the faint scent of jasmine drifting through the night. She had been quiet, almost too quiet, until she finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like life passes you by? Like you give and forget what it's like to be wanted?" Her voice had cracked just enough to betray the strength she always carried. And when she looked at me, her eyes shimmering in the dim porch light, it felt like she was asking me something more than just a question. That night I had frozen too. I had managed a few words, a nod, but I hadn't given her the answer she deserved. And now, sitting across from my boss, I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't sit in silence while both women laid pieces of their hearts in front of me. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. The choice wasn't just about desire. It was about honesty, about respect, about the consequences that would follow no matter what I said. If I reached for my boss's hand, I knew it would lead us down a road filled with risk and passion. If I turned instead toward my friend's mom, it would be a quieter, steadier path. One built on warmth and familiarity. And if I chose neither, it would mean walking away, carrying the ache of what might have been. No matter which way I turned, someone would be hurt. Maybe even me. But the silence had become its own kind of betrayal. I knew then that I couldn't stand in the middle anymore. I had to choose or risk losing them both. The weight of silence had nearly broken me, and I couldn't carry it any longer. It wasn't fair to them or to myself. So I finally spoke. I remember the moment clearly. My boss had asked me to walk her to her car after another late evening. The garage was quiet, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the concrete. She stopped near her car, leaned against the door, and for the first time she didn't hide the softness in her eyes. "There's something between us, isn't there?" she asked quietly. Her voice didn't tremble, but her hands fidgeted against her bag, betraying the nerve she kept so well hidden. I could have lied. I could have laughed it off. But instead I whispered, "Yes, there is." The silence that followed felt endless. And then she stepped closer, so close that the faint scent of her perfume wrapped around me, so close that her hand brushed mine before she pulled it back as though afraid. But before I could say more, before I could let myself fall into that closeness, the image of another night came rushing back. The porch light, the softness in my friend's mom's voice, the way her hand had lingered on mine as she said she felt invisible. 2 women. 2 truths. 2 choices. I knew I couldn't lead them both on, so I told my boss the truth. I admitted that I felt something real, but also confessed that there was someone else I couldn't ignore. Her expression shifted, not with anger, but with quiet acceptance. She gave a faint, almost wistful smile. "You're young," she said gently, "and honest. Don't lose that." Her words stayed with me as I left the garage that night, my heart heavy but strangely lighter too, because for the first time I had chosen honesty over hesitation. The next evening, I found myself at my friend's house again. His mom was in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound as she washed a plate. I stood in the doorway for a long time, unsure how to begin. Finally, I stepped forward. "You said something the other night," I began softly, "about feeling invisible." She turned startled, her eyes searching mine. I took a breath. "You're not invisible to me. You never were." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Instead, she set the plate down and dried her hands slowly, as though buying time. Then she walked toward me, every step measured, her expression unreadable until she finally stopped close. Too close for this to feel like anything but what it was. "You shouldn't say things like that unless you mean them," she whispered. "I do," I said simply. And in that quiet kitchen, without grand gestures, she let her forehead rest gently against mine. Not a kiss, not yet, but something more fragile. An acknowledgement, a beginning. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. But it was real. I thought I had been torn between 2 paths, destined to lose no matter what I chose. But in the end, I realized the truth. Sometimes the choice isn't about what's easiest. It's about what feels most honest. And with her standing there, her hand finding mine in the stillness, I knew that honesty was enough to start something new.